ahead and kick us off. I'm Anna Smith. I'm a proud Kansas Citian from the States, who I live right now in Iquitos, Peru. And we're gonna let Sami introduce herself, but I wanted to just briefly shout out the Climate Council of Greater Kansas City, Bob Grove, who's supporting this event. He's providing all the tech and has been a wonderful partner to us and supporting us in this. We initiated this event today because of the quiet, painful, scary voice that can happen in the back of our head, and wanting to create an open space with lights on and, not too much of an echo chamber, but to designate conversation and safety regarding emotional resilience on climate activism. So I initiated this event with Sami, my colleague from the Resilient Activist, the creator of the Resilient Activist, because I wanted to have spaces for this kind of thing. When people care a lot and their hearts are on the line, there's a lot of grief that happens. And for everybody living in parts of the world undergoing climate changes right now, with bad air quality and fires and floods, this is very real and active. So this is our space to share and to really think about this and take care of each other. So I was inspired by kind of what I saw Sami providing in terms of providing honest, true communication around kind of emotional needs that I think are so often hidden. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I hope everybody can find some needs to be met, and we are wanting to invite everybody during this conversation. Sami is going to present with us to type reflections, comments, and questions in the Q&A throughout the conversation. So things that come to mind, things you're not sure about, things you might need, we want you to go ahead and write it in there. We may not get to it right away, but I will be tuning in and we'll make sure we're following up with stuff as we go along. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sami, who's going to introduce herself.
Thanks so much, Anna. What a delight to be able to be involved. I know Anna and I are both activists, we are you, right? Anna's working with Carbon Almanac and a lot of other organizations and spaces within the environmental world. My role in the past has really been working with land use and restoring pollinator habitat, and especially in suburban gardens. That's kind of my forte. So what we're going to do today is start off with, I've got a Google Slides deck to present, just to kind of give a little bit of boundaries to what we're talking about today, and maybe introduce some ideas or thoughts or topics that you might not have thought about before. And then we're just going to open it up to conversations. So anything that comes up for you, this is a safe space. And so it will be recorded, I will tell you that. And so anything that you do say or identify yourself would be part of the recording. But with that, we want you to know that this community is really about allowing people to just express who they are and where they are, to be in a community of others that get what we're going through, right? So Anna mentioned, the wildfires and the smoke and everything else that's been happening lately. And there is always an emotional component to that. So this is a space where we can kind of come together and feel like this audience is going to just be accepting of everybody wherever they are. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point and just want to welcome everybody here. So, we're looking for a date to host this and really wanted it to be in honor of the United Nations World Environment Day, which was Monday. And so looking at the appropriate day and time, I think it's just really appropriate that people who've registered for this call, whether they're here live or not, have come in from all over the world, right? So Argentina, the UK, Canada, the United States, lots of other countries, India. And so I just invite you to let's just open that up and imagine that we could actually all really be in the same room together, right? Just really connecting with each other. So with the Resilient Activists, we like to start off with a native land acknowledgement. We're here in Kansas City area, but today I want to turn that into a little bit of native land wisdom. And I'm going to be talking about some information that I gleaned from my friend, Dr. Daniel Wildcat, who is a professor of sociology at Haskell Indian Nations University in Lawrence, Kansas. And he has his book, Red Alert, Saving the Planet with Indigenous Knowledge. And what that does is give this concept that a lot of people have heard about the 7 generations, right? He teaches it in a way that's a little different from what I had heard originally. And he talks about taking a look at the 3 generations before us, right? Who were they and how did we get here? Who were they in our personal family? Who were they in our communities? Who were they globally? And then where are we today, coming from on the backs of those 3 generations before us? And then what are we looking at in the future, right? The 3 generations after us, what are we going to offer and leave to future generations? And so it gives us a sense of balance. We are here today based on the past, and we are here today looking towards the future. So I just invite you to kind of have that in mind. And let's just be a little more formal in our introductions. So Anna, I just invite you to spend a moment or two just talking a little more detail about yourself and your activism in your background.
Sure. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. So I am an international human development enthusiast. I am excited about topics related to human flourishing in alignment with the natural world. I live in Iquitos, Peru. I'm from the States. I love working in infectious disease prevention and cancer prevention. I love working with communities directly, partnering with them. I work with a lot of different local communities, including Indigenous communities. My work is based on a servant leadership model and empathy, always. I'm a climate activist and am leading the creation of the Carbon Almanac, which I forgot to mention is one of our wonderful partners here. We're creating a Spanish language version of that book for free, just for the 500 million Spanish speakers in the world. And I'm also a writer, a blogger, an artist, and an activist. So, and kind of newer to the climate space. And excited to be, and my favorite angle so far is emotional resilience. Thanks, Sami.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you for just having this bright idea to reach out. Actually, our connection came through the Climate Council. So thank you, Bob, for having the Climate Council and being able to make those, helping us make those connections. So I am a meditation teacher focusing basically on deep nature connection is a big part of what I teach. I am an extension master naturalist, nature connected educator, which really gets into that intersection of connecting with mindfulness practices in nature to help solve problems, looking at the metaphors, biomimicry, and all that information that we can get from the natural world. I'm a retired yoga teacher. I am a climate reality leader. I had, done that great workshop that Al Gore offers for a climate reality leadership hub. And I'm the founder of the Resilient Activist. And so I just want to share a little bit. The Resilient Activist came from, as many nonprofits do, came from a grief that I suffered 20 years ago. My older son was an environmental activist. He was working on his master's in urban and regional planning. He was in a joint law program. And the more that he understood about the deep global complexity, all the environmental injustices, the less that he felt like he was going to make any difference. And we lost him to suicide in 2003. So in these intervening years, the Resilient Activist is 5 years old. I just had in the back of my mind what might have helped him, right? Like we have this saying at the Resilient Activist that the world needs inspired and visionary activists who have the resilience to see us through these difficult times. And it was just with that thought, what would a resilient activist look like? An activist that still had joy in their lives, right? Was still enthusiastic and could look at burnout and know ways, have tools and support to be able to address burnout, frustration, anger, guilt, grief, whatever came with that. So that's where the Resilient Activist came from, and that's basically our mission. Today's agenda, I will introduce you to the resilient activists in a little more detail. We'll define the terms resilience and activism. We'll talk about the emotional toll of climate activists and what unique perspective activists have, different from the general population that's experiencing climate anxiety or worry. I have a bunch of resources for climate grief and the environmental activist. We'll talk a little bit about self-care as activism, and then what's next for you in your journey. And I just wanted to say this is an open conversation. If something, Anna is monitoring the chat or the Q&A. If there's something you want to stop and have a conversation about, feel free to put that in there, okay? And it is being recorded. We will have that recording available for you within the next day or two, okay? So,
and it's closed captioning available if you want to turn that.
Yeah. Thank you, very good. So the resilient activist, our mission is to cultivate resilience to environmental stress by supporting community, personal well-being, and vital ecological health. And, you know, we all know the image of the overwhelmed and exhausted activist, but it doesn't have to be that way. Our role really is to help activists make that paradigm shift to promote nurturing ourselves while we nurture a healthy planet. And so we have our own definition of activism. We believe that it's the art of taking action to support, nurture, and protect what we hold dear. It doesn't have to be raised fists, angry faces, and deep fear, right, that we carry. And so what is resilience? Resilience builds support for the long term. It bypasses overwhelm and burnout because taking care of our whole selves allows us to continue our important work, okay? So the Resilient Activist sponsored a focus group research study in September of 2020, early pandemic. We partnered with the psychology department at the University of Kansas and had 46 people from around the world who identified as environmental activists. They participated in 90-minute small group discussions to explore their thoughts and feelings about the climate crisis. And so here are the results to the question, when you think about climate change and environmental degradation, what kind of emotions do you feel? And this was the results. At the highest level, sadness, anger, and frustration, right? This is for activists. And then other emotions are there, but not nearly as prevalent. And I want to compare this to a research study that was done just about a year ago in response to 10,000 young people, ages 16 to 25, when they were asked, how does climate change make you feel? Notice that sadness, being in fear, anxiety, angriness, anger, those are all a little bit higher than they were for the activists. So we have, as activists, we have a little bit different perspective on our activism in terms of what's actually happening or not happening. So a couple things that have come out of this in the last few years is a whole new jargon in the mental health community about emotions related to climate change. So we have eco-anxiety is a constant worry and fretting, obsessing about news reports and videos, worry about what could happen, right? And then we have pre-traumatic stress disorder. So it's similar to post-traumatic stress, but it's based on fear of the future, and especially for activists who see certain weather events happening around the world. And we know that we are in line for certain things to also happen where we live, for our families and the people that we love. And then terror fury, leading to future violence over environmental destruction and its protection. And I know globally, there are homicides, there's intimidation, there's threats, there's all kinds of things that are happening to people that are just working to protect the earth. And so anger is a very real and very honest reaction to a lot of what's happening around the world. So what I want to do here is I'm going to stop share in just a moment and kind of switch the conversation or open up the conversation to how is your activism taking a toll on your well-being? How are you being impacted by the climate crisis? And so we'll just invite you to put that in the Q&A. Anna, you might have some things you want to kind of throw out there while we wait for people to respond.
Sure. So yeah, please just go ahead and just share something, whatever comes to mind. I feel like a lot of people have struggled with feeling like if there's a sense of futility, that there's just it's over, it's done. It's, you know, people wondering whether or not they want to have children, people wondering if there's just any effort towards this is not going to move us in the right direction. So it's kind of the most common, I think, painful emotion I hear is sort of that it's over. And that being kind of like, if something was already over, if I already read the end of a really sad story, why would I go back and, you know, like if we already know the ending, why do we care about the middle? And I think that's a common emotional reaction. I'll just like add a count of that. We actually don't know what's happening at the end. We're in the process in the middle. So I think a lot of this is based on presumptions. But that's a common emotional thing I hear. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the Q&A. What have we seen from folks? Eco-anxiety and the forms of frustration, mostly maybe some pre-traumatic stress. Anybody else want to share? Oh, concerned about drought. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if anyone has any specific examples, so of forms of frustration or forms of frustration, right, or pre-traumatic stress, you know, just feel free to throw some of those in. And, you know, I might also suggest you think about how has your activism impacted your relationships, right? Is there anything that happens as you deal with your family, for example, or friends or employers, that things that you know and they don't know, or they know and they don't care about them in the same way that you do. So just a little bit of thoughtfulness here. Yeah.
So yeah, concerns about drought. I know that's the issues. Cecilia, who's in Argentina, we have Amazon rainforest burning. Yeah, that's a huge concern. Concerns about how people will treat each other. What is the human dynamic? What are human dynamics going to look like in the future? Jen mentions, I have a range of emotions. Some days I feel hopeful, others frustrated and angry and excited about the possibilities that I can see happening. There's a range of feelings there. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Anyone else want to jump in? We want to go ahead.
All right. Thank you, everyone. You know, it is such a broad topic. And of course, we all bring our own baggage to our activism, right? We have whatever we carry from our childhood forward, our own personalities, our own mindsets and ways of coping. And being part of this global action only exacerbates a lot of what we already are, right? And especially dealing in relationships. So it's just helpful to think about that, to kind of put that into perspective. So I want to share something. Some of you are, I'm sure, familiar with Aldo Leopold from his Sand County Almanac. I don't normally read word for word, but I'm going to do that, right, for this particular slide, because I think it really states a lot of what activists are feeling. One of the penalties of an ecological education is that one lives alone in a world of wounds. Much of the damage inflicted on land is quite invisible to laymen. An ecologist must either harden his shell and make believe that the consequences of science are none of his business, or he must be the doctor who sees the marks of death in a community that believes itself well and does not want to be told otherwise. So more and more individuals are learning about or even experiencing the impacts of climate change, severe weather events, heat islands, wildfires, sea level rise, and so on. And most of us are not equipped to take the knowledge we now have and process it in a healthy way. Librarians, mental health professionals, all those people who are really getting into the crux of climate change and the emotions of it carry their own primary, secondary traumas. So even people like yourselves, whatever aspect of climate change or environmental work that you're in, you carry your own primary or secondary trauma, right? Just because of what you've experienced, what you read, what you know, and what you fear. And there's this, personal reaction to it. So to give you an example of that, so my perspective dealing in land use, looking at these two pictures here, on the left is a Callery pear, also known as a Bradford pear, and on the right is the Japanese or shrub honeysuckle. So where we are in the States and really around many of the states in the United States, these are two highly invasive species, and they were put in many, many new developments, right? Because they're beautiful, right? The honeysuckle smells really great. Callery pear does not smell that great, but beautiful blooms, and they're all over. They both naturalized, and they're out in our wild areas, really difficult to eradicate and making a really severe impact on biodiversity in our natural areas. This is something that activists see that others wouldn't know. So when we are told that, oh, go out into nature, right? It's going to help with your stress and your grief, right? Just take your worries out in the natural world. For those of us that work in this and we go out from our driveway every day, and this is what we see, that concept of being out in nature where the entire understory you can see as far as you can see is the shrub honeysuckle, right? It's not that great for our emotional state, right? It just exacerbates whatever grief we might already be carrying. So I'm going to be talking about some ways to alleviate some of that in a few minutes.
And just to jump in, Sammy,
yeah.
One example that I have is spending time with my family in Colorado. My mom and stepdad are here, and the importance of being out and taking walks in nature as kind of one of the most important parts of the summer to de-stress. And then with all the forest fires, you're walking through burn. You're walking through destruction, right? And you're also walking through this amazing neon glow of things coming up, the new things growing. But kind of what has been a refuge for many people is, it can actually feel like an injury. And I think that's part of maybe that looking in nature to heal you, and then also looking in nature and that moment and having additional grief. So anyone wants to reflect, just make a note in the chat. But thanks, Sammy.
Thanks, Anna. And Anna she'll butt in anytime that she has something in the chat that she wants to share in the Q&A. So moral injury, some of you might not know this term. I encounter moral injury all the time in conversation with environmental professionals and scientists. And here's how it shows up. There is suffering or pain, right? Something going on out there. You, as a professional, maybe you're a professional volunteer, but you're knowledgeable. You witness this suffering, right? Either primary or as a first responder, maybe to an area of destruction. Maybe it's secondary trauma, you're doing cleanup work, or you're even viewing images of the suffering or videos, right? You have the skills to remediate the problem, or you know people that do, right? You carry the occupational identity with you because you want to alleviate suffering. It's a self-identifying burden that you carry by choosing the work that you do. That's a big part of it, right? It's not just about water quality. It's about your emotional connection to clean, healthy, fresh water. But the problem is you may or may not have the funding to deal with this problem, right? You may or may not have an employer or government agency or legislative body that allows you to act on this. Here we are in the state of Missouri. It's against the law for cities to put bans on plastic bags, right? That's illegal. So you're like, oh my gosh. And then also, you might not have the time, the energy, or the resources to take those necessary steps. So if you want to know more about this, just do a browser search on moral injury and climate change. And there's a whole lot of resources about the ethical issues of what we carry emotionally. Fortunately, there is hope. There's a lot of organizations that have sprung up. the Climate Psychology Alliance of both North America and the UK, the Climate Psychiatry Alliance, which is mostly in the United States and Canada. They're really beginning to address these emotional needs within the mental health community, and they are regrouping themselves because working with people who have emotional responses to climate change is different than working with people with other identified mental health illnesses and conditions, right? This is a little bit different, community-based. It's a lot more complex. So these organizations are working with that. They have partnered for a climate aware therapist pledge and a climate informed therapist directory. So especially if you are grieving or fearful about the climate crisis, or you know someone who is, I invite you to please reach out to these organizations to be part of a supportive and understanding community. A few more resources, the Good Grief Network, Climate Mental Health Network is a great resource for, they're doing a lot of film work with Gen Z population and kind of have their fingers in on a lot of different organizations that are doing this work. Midwest Alliance for Mindfulness offer meditations from a lot of different perspectives, and a lot of their programs are online. Pachamama Alliance, coming from the Amazon, is a great organization and has wonderful programming. And then the Mind and Life Institute, it specifically focuses on mindfulness practices, and they have a lot of programming on mindfulness, nature connection, and climate grief. So we want to make those recommendations. We have 3 of my favorite books for this topic: A Field Guide to Climate Anxiety, How to Keep Your Cool on a Warming Planet by Sarah Jaquette Ray. She's a professor of environmental studies at Humboldt State University in California. And we've had her on some of our programs. If you go to the Resilient Activists YouTube channel, we've got some recordings of some presentations that she's done for us in the past. Very helpful, lots of mindfulness practices, community building, and deep nature connection. And then Generation Dread by Britt Ray. Britt has a great blog post that she offers in a weekly newsletter. She focuses on kind of Gen Z. A lot of her focuses deals with people who are trying to decide whether they'll have children, right? Bring children into the world, and kind of that whole dynamic. And then All the Feelings Under the Sun by psychologist Leslie Davenport. This is geared for young people, like even starting ages 8 or 9 up through high school. And actually it's good for all of us. Each chapter takes one aspect of climate change or environmental destruction, explains the science about it, all the information that someone might want to know. What are the problems? What are the issues? And then it shifts into identifying emotions that come up, and then some resilience tools for each chapter. So maybe one chapter is a breathing practice, or another one might be an art project, and so on. Great resource for young people. The Resilient Activists, most of our programming revolves around these 5 essentials for a resilient world. They're just simple concepts to help people understand, make decisions, and take actions in ways that benefit humans, non-humans, and all our planet's ecosystems. So reconnect with nature, support nurturing and working with our human nature while connecting to the natural world. Respect all life, everybody else, all beings, right? All living beings, as well as ourselves. Regreening the planet explores ways to restore natural areas and bring that nature into our everyday lives as a healing tool. Revamp our spending, investing our resources, time, energy, money, influence in what we really care about, and then spending from our personal values in alignment with a healthy planet. And replenish our resources, our tools to soothe ourselves, right? Heal from hurts, see more clearly, engage our strengths, and find joy while mindfully noticing how we can replenish the natural world around us. So here's how this works. For example, regreen the planet. We believe that self-care can be activism, and activism can be self-care, right? So when you regreen the planet, you put in a pollinator garden, or a little rain garden or water site or whatever, you're out working in nature to restore healthy habitat. We all know that's really good for the planet, right? It's good for water quality, air quality, helping benefit degraded populations of pollinators and other wildlife. We all know how good that is. From a self-care perspective, when you are able to be in nature and see places, especially that you personally have restored, your body will become aware of the cycle of the seasons, right? You inhale the scent of blossoms and you're receiving phytoncides, which are antibacterial and aromatic therapies, right? Maybe you take an intentional respite from being an activist when you just settle into being in nature. And your heart will swell each time you see a little pollinator land on a blossom that you planted, right? Or some other wild creature who finds habitat and food there. Your heart just goes, oh, this feels really good, right? It's really good for your emotional well-being to know that you're making a difference, right? So I'm going to, first I want to ask, is there anything in the Q&A, Anna, before I move on?
No, but I would love to pause to Sami and ask everybody to, those who want to share, what is one way you can enact self-care as activism in your own life? Just to brainstorm, thinking about what would be nourishing for you individually.
That's a great idea.
I mean, just pause, just give folks a moment to think about it. What activism in your own self-care?
And we can share the Q&A afterwards. We'll send an email out. So you'll be able to see what people have posted. Thank you. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to play this little video and just imagine yourself as one of these rosebuds, okay, in your activism role. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to stop the share. What did you notice, Anna? Did you get a chance to watch it? You're muted.
I did. Before I do, I just want to mention a comment in the chat from Barbara. So allowing yourself to love being out in nature, a lot to really, and love in all caps. So that's a way of self-care as activism, to really love that experience. What did I notice? Well, I noticed that it wasn't all the same throughout the process. I think if we want to, one thing I want to jump in is thinking about ourselves in terms of biomimicry. We're animals, you know, so we're also going to have cycles where we are able to have more, you know, we will have perhaps more energy or strength or ability to take on certain things. And there's cycles of rest. There's cycles of being away. There's in the protective covering of a seed, things have to kind of slowly start its own process as you're creating new projects and developing new things. So kind of honoring our own selves as creatures who need care as much as anything external to our bodies in the world, that we're part of nature that needs caring for. I think that's kind of a nice frame for people who are very nature obsessed, not necessarily very big on humans. So another question I would challenge folks to meditate on is, how can I consider myself part of nature that needs to be cared for? So versus it just being humans versus nature, I am nature too, and I deserve the same level of care that I want to give this forest. So, and what I noticed in your video, Sami, yeah, as I noticed, it's not, things kind of get poofy, things kind of shrink down, things aren't all the wedding pink flowers, you know, there's a cycle. And I'd love to see in the video, I don't know if I missed it, but them decomposing into the earth nourishing the ground, and then the new cycle starting again, all the worms coming in, eating them, and so forth. So all that being part of our lives and our activism too. I'm gonna look for any other comments. Okay, great. So Victor, I'm rewilding a portion of my yard to allow for more native plants and carbon sequestration. Harvesting rainwater to use in the garden, using solar panels, and I'm hiking at the parks more. That's your self-care activism. Is lovely. Cecilia mentioned consuming natural food, not ultra-processed food, cutting down on plastic, care for water usage, getting information, and encouraging others to follow suit. Cecilia was very supportive in promoting this event today too. That's a wonderful thing. And there are lots of things we can do. Yeah, lovely. Any other comments, or does anyone else want to share their reflections on that video in the chat too? I think that was a lovely.
Yeah, I'm going to add a couple things. I mean, yeah, I loved your reflection. For a couple of things. First of all, it's kind of that, some of it reminds me of that take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. Or was it even take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back? Because sometimes when you had that blossom up, it really shrank before it had the energy to do more, right? And the other thing was,
it fell a bit. It actually fell down a little bit.
It did. Yeah, it went back. It's like, oh my gosh, was it done? Was it dying? No, it had more, right? And the other was, if you noticed any judgment. So there were 3 blossoms there, right? 2 were the same. They were about as active and as big. And the other one wasn't quite ready yet. It was going at its own pace and it was not as big. And, you know, this whole concept in nature, my guess is no one judged that one little rosebud that it wasn't going fast enough. It wasn't big enough. It needed to grow. It wasn't nearly as good as the other 2, right? We don't have that judgment when we're really looking at the metaphors in nature.
Well, and I think too, the rosebud is doing, it's also just caring for its own life. It's nourishing, you know, it's part of a plant itself. There's different parts of the plant, but there's also a self-interest in the plant being able to sustain its own life, right? So there's not, I think what happens in activism is we get so obsessed with the fact that we can't fix the entire problem, that I can't control the wildfires in Canada right now, that I'm useless. Whereas what matters too is this plant, is this person, you know, and I think the tuning back in on that and how can we allow that and nourish that in ourselves. And even what do we need to do to remember that when we get overwhelmed? I want to invite people to meditate on that too.
Well put.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the 4 steps for resilient life. This is a workshop that the Resilient Activist offers that just helps activists figure out what is theirs to do. Well, I'll just kind of go through this here. The first step is we go through and have people review and make a list as a workshop. Make a list of everything you're doing as an activist and everything you're giving. Like so many of us are just givers and givers and givers, right? And you make that whole list reviewing everything that's just part of your life. And it might be the really important things that you do. And it might be things like turning off the water when you brush your teeth. Like it could be any level. You just make this huge list. The second step is to rejoice, to notice those items in your list, highlight them in some way that you love to do, that make you happy, right? That feel good. You have the money, the time, the effort, the transportation, the education, the knowledge, whatever, that whatever that particular activism is, that action, it just feels really good for you to do it, right? And then you celebrate that, because we rarely take time to even acknowledge what all we've done, right? Anna was talking about, you know, did the rose really worry about wildflowers or wildfires rather? No, the rose was just worried about what it needs to do right now. And so sometimes just stepping back and reflecting on what we're doing that makes us really happy and noticing the length of that list can be really, really emotionally uplifting. And then the next step, step 3, is to reflect on those items that we did not circle that we loved, right? Ones that cause us some grief for some reason or other. And this is where a mindfulness practice comes in, really helpful to get into a quiet space and ask yourself, what is it about this one particular action that I don't love. Why not? And really journaling that, thinking about it, because then in step 4, we take a look at how might we reimagine that action, the ones we don't love. Do we change them, do them in a different way with different people in a different time frame? Or at some point, do we just decide that that's not ours to do, right? And we can let that go. If it's a really important issue for you, but you're going to decide to step away from it, I just encourage you to go do a browser search on that topic and see how many millions and billions of people are working on that project, right? You're not the only one working on that particular issue. And then secondly, pick out a couple of those organizations and send them thank you notes, right? Let them know how much you care about what they're doing. That's always a great uplift for me. And so you drop some, you reimagine some. And so as you reimagine them, now they get added to that long list in number 2, right, of the things you love to do, or it opens up some more space in your life for self-care, right, or for reimagining really what aspects you want to work on. So we offer these as public events. We're having one July 17th, 6:30 p.m. Central Time in the States, and on Zoom. And we also offer them for private organizations. So if you're part of a group and would like to meet together, whether in person, if you're, somewhere within the Kansas City region, or we can, set up a Zoom call to work together as a community for whatever group you are. Typically a 2-hour workshop. We've done it as a 6-hour half-day retreat. So kind of anything in between that. It's just been a really, really helpful practice for people. So some other upcoming events we have. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we move on, I want to invite folks to Sami, what do you think? If we give folks maybe 5 minutes to reflect on their own items, what are things that you're currently doing, or are we on time?
I love that idea. Yeah.
Let's take 5 minutes, everybody. Please just this is a space just to be generous with yourself. You could, I offer, you can list 3 things you're already doing for climate. Make a point of rejoicing for each item on your list and reflecting on this meaning. And maybe throughout the next day or 2, we can think about reimagining what that would look like going forward. So we can give folks 5 minutes. That's going to be at 51 minutes past. We'll be done. This is a moment to practice. Thanks. You're also welcome to put it in the Q&A if you want. You don't need to.
And what you might do is add on things that you wished you could be doing, right? Doesn't have to be what you've been doing already necessarily. You can also add on some new ideas that you've been thinking about for a long time.
Okay, I just would like, there's a function in Zoom called raising your hand. I'd like for everybody to have something they're proud of to raise their hand. So you've done something you're proud of, like scheduling this event. Why don't you raise your hand? I'll raise mine. You'll see that? Okay. All right. I don't know. Okay. You'll see at the bottom of this whole thing. Okay.
We can see Barbara and Tanya.
Tanya.
Yeah.
Okay, who here had an opportunity to rejoice a bit and to feel the feeling of reflection of joy of something you've done? Anyone want to? I also felt that way. Yeah, feeling rejoice, gratitude for what you've done. And that, I think the important part on that is going to be allowing that feeling to even be in the body, that sense of gratitude in your heart center, kind of, this is something I've done. Victor. I feel very grateful that you all are here. I feel grateful that we made this event, that we made it possible. I'm grateful to myself for having done it. That's one of those on my list. Anyone else want to share anything from their list? While we're oh, Katie White mentioning on my focus, yeah, composting for 3 households. Katie has been a really important person who helped me get connected to all this. I'm grateful for her. Recycling everything I can, shopping at my second-hand stores, first or marketplace, shopping local markets, growing food in her garden beds. That's amazing. Bara mentions, really appreciate the focus on this because it hits our own internal processing of this issue, our own emotional fragility, our own ecology emotionally, and addressing our actions in climate change. There's a sense of kindness to self instead of blame or being guilty or helpless. Lovely. Any other reflections? My hand's still up here. Okay, Sami, what were the other 2 steps we had? We had listing what they were, rejoicing. What were the other 2?
Reflecting and reimagining.
Okay. So going forward, perhaps, so which actions are stressful or difficult? Maybe giving yourself a chance to reflect on those things in the next couple of days. And what can I do to shift and support my well-being? Reimagining. Okay.
And I would just encourage people to, this can continue, even after we're finished with the webinar, take whatever you've been writing on and take that out to nature somewhere, get comfortable and just allow yourself to really kind of embody this practice. It can be really freeing, right? So some of our upcoming events, we have a Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Book Club that meets the 3rd Tuesday evening of every month. Great, another safe space to talk about difficult topics. Our 4 Steps for Resilient Life Intensive, we've talked about public event July 17th, and we also do private events for groups. We have a full Speakers Bureau program, taking meaningful action through political engagement, deep nature connection and outdoor interpretation. That's really for people who take people out to nature. It's some mindfulness practices and some ways to really deepen that so that people don't think, well, I'm out in nature because I'm running on this trail and I got 12 minutes left, right? It's more about really embodying your presence there. So we've got some workshops to help people who lead people in nature, to give them some tools to offer people. We also have an online community called Mighty Networks. This is a safe social media space. A couple people on the call here are part of that group. It's free, and we're just really happy to have that kind of safe social media place where people can post, comment, message people, and so on, without all the hoopla of some of the other social media sites. We do have a 10-week mindfulness and resilience training immersion that we offer to individual organizations. This is really intensive mindfulness practices, nature connection, some psychological coping skills and resilience tools. And then we have had a number of research studies too. So we are just about at the end here, although there's a couple minutes. We really value your feedback. We would love to have you fill out their survey for us and just let us know how we did today. You can reach out to me, Sami at theresilientactivist.org, or Anna Kohler Smith at gmail.com. This little guy really wants you to reach out to him. We would love to have your donations if you're interested and you have those funds available as a nonprofit. We're always grateful for financial support. And I just want to end this with the legend of the eagle and the condor, which some of you might be familiar with, but there is hope for a bright future for humanity on this planet. The eagle and the condor prophecy of the Amazon speaks of long ago when human society split into two different paths. That of the eagle, which is the mind, the industrial, technological, and scientific, and that of the condor, the heart, intuition, and deep nature connection. And the prophecy states that this is the time, kind of in the late 1990s, when the two will reunite to bring our world back into balance to ensure a resilient future. So that's where we are today, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and have this survey QR code on the screen. We would love to have your feedback. And Anna, I think you've got some closing remarks you'd like to make.
And you know what, Sami, I can't do the chat box to put the form in there. Oh, shoot. I might, if it's okay, I could email folks with the form afterwards. And
Yeah, we'll do that. That's right. We don't have.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, the chat's a little different than usual today, but I can reach out with that. One thing I wanted just to close with is a comment Celia just made about stopping blaming yourself for saving the entire world. And so instead of that, thinking about what things has Cecilia done, a number of amazing things, by the way, in the Carbon Almanac. What are the things you have done? And how you can be grateful and kind of nourish that joy in yourself for what you've done, and what can you carry around from those experiences with you as that feeling versus the blame. Why didn't I prevent the wildfires in Canada? You know, those kinds of questions that we can ask. So
let me interject something that we talk about a lot. So let's say you have 10,000 thoughts a day, right? And if you spend 9,800 of those looking at what's wrong and researching and, internet dive into what's wrong and all those people and what they're doing, that only leaves you 200 thoughts to figure out what you're going to have for breakfast, when you're going to go to the bathroom, whatever, right? So if you cut that in half and you only spent half of your time or less really staying on top of the topics that interest you, and then the other half of that time is like, and what can I do? Right? Who's doing what? Who's doing these great things? It's just a real great way to balance out and help set your own resilience boundaries. So that's it. I'm done.
Any other closing comments or anything? We're right 1 minute left. I'm still reading stuff. But we want to encourage folks to the 4 steps. I want to repeat them one more time. So we're reviewing what you've already done. We started off on our 5 minutes. Rejoicing in what you've done. The third one, Sami, remind me, is, oh, you're on mute.
Reflecting and then reimagining.
Okay, so what are the things that are difficult for you, and how those things can be reimagined in a new way?
Right.
Yeah.
And then
So,
one of the things we wanted out of this event was, what else can we do for you? This is what the Resilient Activist does. Some of you on the call know that. You come to our other programs, but we are really open to your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, and especially dealing with a global audience and how we can just help continue this conversation and maybe see who else you might want to invite to join future conversation.
yeah, if there's things folks are needing, your specific needs, please do communicate those with somebody, with one of us. And we would love to, the point is we have a network and we want to use it. So let's not keep them anxiously to yourself.
Right. And you can just go to the resilientactivist.org and reach out to us through the contact there. And yeah.
I want to give a plug to the Resilient Activist. It is an treasure trove, friends. So spend some time on Sami's site and dig in. There's videos, there's different events, there's a lot that's free, that's just there. So that's a great way to begin to nourish that in yourself. And none of that's just already sitting there. It's a treasure box, just open it. So that's all you gotta do. All right, and I think we're at time. So thanks everybody. We'll be following up.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.